Welcome back to another thrilling deep dive. BTS conquered the globe, shattered records, and stole millions of hearts. But behind the blinding stage lights and deafening screams of ARMY lies a strictly guarded secret. Why is the romantic life of the biggest boyband on the planet practically a ghost town? Are they genuinely too busy, or is there a much heavier, complicated reality hiding behind those perfect smiles? What exactly are they protecting? Get ready to question everything you know. Number 7 RM, the weight of leadership, silent sacrifices. When we talk about the phenomenal, gravity-defying ascent of BTS into the stratosphere of global music dominance, it is absolutely impossible to ignore the towering, steadfast figure of Kim Namjoon, globally recognized as RM, the visionary leader who continuously carries the immense, crushing weight of the world on his incredibly broad shoulders. Imagine for a second the unparalleled psychological pressure of being the spokesperson, the cultural translator, and the philosophical anchor for the biggest and most influential boy band in human history, standing before the United Nations General Assembly in a tailored suit to deliver a message of self-love to the youth, or sitting down in the historic Oval Office of the White House to discuss crucial, sensitive issues like anti-Asian hate crimes with the President of the United States. This isn't just about making catchy pop music or executing perfect choreographies anymore. This is about representing an entire nation, acting as the definitive voice of a marginalized, anxious generation, and spearheading a global cultural movement, all of which directly feeds into the very core of why his personal and romantic life remains tightly locked away in an impenetrable, soundproof vault. To truly understand RM's absolute secrecy regarding his love life, we must first dive incredibly deep into the highly demanding, meticulously manufactured and rigorously monitored world of the K-pop industry, a well-oiled corporate machine where idols are frequently packaged as highly accessible, flawless entities, inadvertently cultivating a fierce, obsessive parasocial dynamic where a certain fraction of the demographic invests their entire emotional and financial bandwidth into the intoxicating illusion of absolute availability. While the global ARMY is widely celebrated for their unprecedented maturity, massive philanthropic power, and organized social activism, the harsh, inescapable reality of the South Korean entertainment ecosystem dictates that dating is still widely perceived and brutally weaponized as a scandalous betrayal by traditional media, invasive paparazzi, and jittery corporate investors whose portfolios depend on the pristine image of these stars. For RM, a man deeply revered for his profound intellect, his endless reflections on human nature, and his breathtakingly introspective solo masterworks like Mono and Indigo, projects that practically bleed with intense themes of urban isolation, existential longing, and the exhausting search for authentic identity. Hiding a love life isn't necessarily about maliciously deceiving the public or playing a cynical corporate game, but rather a calculated, agonizingly mature sacrifice to protect the multi-billion-dollar empire he painstakingly built from the absolute ground up with his 6 brothers. He knows that his actions carry monumental, world-shifting consequences. By remaining single in the public eye, he is actively shielding any potential partner from the ruthless, unforgiving glare of the paparazzi machinery, dodging notorious outlets like Dispatch that thrive on stalking celebrities, hiding in dark parking lots, and tearing down untouchable icons for the sake of cheap viral clicks. The stakes for someone in RM's specific position of leadership are unimaginably, terrifyingly high. A single, unverified rumor, a blurry photograph of him having a quiet, intimate dinner with a romantic interest, or even an innocent social media post misconstrued by eagle-eyed netizens could send HYBE's stock prices plummeting overnight, trigger endless vicious online fan wars, and unfairly shift the global media's focus from their groundbreaking, deeply healing artistry to cheap, sensational tabloid gossip. Such a catastrophic event would fundamentally disrespect the blood, sweat, and literal tears the members have poured into their craft for well over a decade, starting from their darkest days sleeping in a cramped, humid single-room dorm in Nonhyeondong where they had absolutely nothing but raw ambition, debt, and an unbreakable belief in each other. Therefore, RM consciously chooses to channel his deepest affections, romantic yearnings, and vulnerabilities into what the fandom affectionately calls Namjooning, quietly wandering through empty modern art galleries, riding his bicycle along the breezy banks of the Han River at dusk, and seeking genuine, unfiltered solace in the silent company of his beloved bonsai trees and complex literature. He essentially uses these solitary, uncontroversial outlets to manage his overwhelmingly deep emotional capacity, effectively sublimating his natural romantic desires and profound yearning for normal human connection into his devastatingly honest songwriting, turning his personal, suffocating loneliness into a source of universal comfort for millions of listeners around the globe. He is acutely, painfully aware that the glittering, diamond-encrusted crown of leadership comes with the impossibly heavy price of his own personal freedom. Understanding that his every single move, outfit and facial expression is hyperanalyzed, dissected, and judged by both fiercely adoring fans and waiting to pounce critics, making the simple, universally human act of falling in love, going on a late-night movie date, and proudly holding someone's hand in public an absolute impossible luxury that he simply cannot afford. If he were to step out of line and boldly declare his love for someone, it could potentially detonate the harmonious, carefully protected sanctuary he has fought like a bloodied warrior to maintain for BTS, risking the mental health and careers of his bandmates who rely entirely on his unwavering stability and strategic foresight. This is the ultimate tragic beauty of RM's daily reality. He freely gives his massive heart, his hard-earned wisdom and the absolute prime years of his youth to the world, translating the vast, confusing universe for millions of people who feel utterly lost in the dark, while simultaneously, bravely choosing to lock away the most intimate, delicate and vulnerable parts of his own soul. He actively chooses to shoulder the crushing, deafening loneliness of supreme fame, ensuring that the legendary dream of BTS can continue to burn brightly, untouched and unextinguished by the toxic, destructive controversies that inevitably follow high-profile romances in the cutthroat, hyper-competitive world of idol culture, leaving all of us to sit back in absolute awe and wonder exactly how much this brilliant, poetic man silently bears when the deafening stadium lights finally shut off. The roaring screams fade into a ringing silence, and he is left entirely alone with his profound thoughts in the quiet, echoing solitude of his room. Number 6. Jin, the mask of worldwide handsome, a flawless illusion. When we shift our intense, scrutinizing gaze to the oldest member of this monumental septet, the endlessly charming and visually breathtaking Kim Seokjin, universally adored across the globe as worldwide handsome, we are instantly confronted with a fascinating, almost heartbreaking paradox of blinding public confidence masking a deeply guarded, intensely private reality that few will ever truly comprehend. To the untrained eye of a casual viewer, Jin appears as the ultimate, untouchable epitome of self-assurance, constantly blowing his signature, dramatic flying kisses to screaming stadium crowds of tens of thousands, effortlessly breaking the ice in awkward, high-pressure Western television interviews with his booming, contagious windshield wiper laugh, and loudly declaring his own physical perfection with a masterful comedic timing that absolutely nobody else in the entire K-pop industry could ever possibly replicate without coming across as painfully arrogant or utterly out of touch. Yet behind this brilliantly crafted, highly entertaining persona, a persona he intentionally constructed and weaponized to fiercely protect the agonizingly shy, deeply introverted young man he truly was when he first debuted, lies the crushing, unspoken burden of being the Madyoung, or the eldest brother, in a deeply traditional, heavily hierarchical South Korean culture where the absolute highest standards of moral responsibility, emotional stability, and unwavering personal sacrifice are permanently placed squarely upon his broad, sculpted shoulders. It is a well-documented fact that Jin was originally scouted simply getting off a bus, a naive university acting major with absolutely zero background in the brutal, cutthroat world of underground hip-hop or competitive street dance, meaning he had to literally shed blood, sweat and endless tears behind closed practice room doors, pushing his physical body far beyond its natural breaking point, just to desperately catch up to the terrifyingly high skill level of his younger prodigy bandmates, thereby cultivating a desperate, relentless drive for absolute perfection that completely consumes every waking second of his incredibly regimented life. In the hypervigilant, notoriously unforgiving ecosystem of the Korean entertainment industry, where a single, slightly misconstrued interaction with a female celebrity can instantly ignite a blazing inferno of career-ending rumors, vicious cyberbullying and massive fan boycotts that tank corporate stock prices in minutes, Jin fundamentally understands that his pristine, unblemished public image is not merely a selfish vanity project, but rather the foundational bedrock upon which the emotional safety and professional security of his younger members heavily relies. If the eldest brother, the designated moral pillar of the group, were to carelessly stumble into a messy, public romantic entanglement, it would set a catastrophic precedent, inviting a relentless swarm of paparazzi into their tightly sealed sanctuary and potentially shattering the sacred, carefully maintained illusion of their absolute, undivided dedication to their fans and their craft. Therefore, Jin utilizes his legendary, groan-inducing dad jokes, his chaotic hours-long gaming live streams, and his loud, boisterous on-camera antics as a brilliantly effective, practically impenetrable emotional armor, deliberately creating a blinding smokescreen of pure, unadulterated entertainment that keeps the aggressively prying eyes of sensationalist tabloid journalists perpetually distracted and permanently miles away from his actual fragile human heart. He actively chooses to fill his rare, precious moments of downtime with incredibly mundane, non-controversial hobbies, waking up at ungodly hours to quietly go sea fishing with older industry seniors, making homemade strawberry jam to hand-deliver to his friends, or spending days locked inside his room aggressively playing MapleStory, because these simple isolated activities are the only completely safe, unconditionally secure spaces where he can finally drop the exhausting, suffocating mask of a global superstar and just exist as Kim Seokjin, a normal man in his 30s who inevitably craves genuine affection, warmth, and normal human connection just like anyone else on this lonely planet. Even as he bravely and flawlessly completed his mandatory military service, serving as a highly respected drill instructor, and further solidifying his untouchable reputation as an incredibly responsible, deeply honorable citizen of his country, the intense global spotlight never once wavered, proving that absolutely no amount of time away from the stage could ever diminish the terrifying level of public surveillance he is permanently subjected to. Hiding his love life isn't just a standard contractual obligation. It is a profound, fiercely protective act of love for BTS and for ARMY, a silent, ironclad vow to ensure that his personal romantic desires never, ever become a toxic, uncontrollable weapon used to attack the monumental legacy they have built together over a decade of unimaginable hardship. He knows exactly how the brutal media machine operates, eagerly waiting in the shadows to commodify his private affections, scrutinize a potential partner's every past mistake, and twist innocent late-night dates into scandalous front-page betrayals, which means that to truly love someone in his incredibly elevated position is to practically doom them to a life of endless harassment, digital stalking, and impossible comparisons. By keeping his romantic world entirely invisible, locked tightly away behind walls of forced laughter and comedic bravado, Jin makes the ultimate heart-wrenching sacrifice of his own personal freedom, generously giving millions of people around the globe a safe, reliable reason to smile every single day, while bravely accepting the cold, quiet reality that the very fame which gave him the entire world has simultaneously, permanently robbed him of the simple, beautiful right to love freely and openly without fear. Number 5. Suga, the tortured genius bound by the studio. When we turn our intense, analytical focus to the enigmatic, brutally honest, and fiercely independent soul of Min Yoongi, known to the sprawling universe as Suga, and his raw, unfiltered alter ego Agus D, we are plunging straight into the deepest, darkest, and most profoundly complex psychological waters of the entire BTS narrative. To even begin to comprehend why a globally revered, multimillionaire producer and rap icon keeps his romantic life locked away in an impenetrable soundproof vault, you have to physically travel back in time to the freezing, rain-soaked streets of Daegu, where a starving, desperate underground rapper named Gloss was selling his intricately crafted beats for pennies just to afford a single bowl of noodles, constantly choosing between eating dinner or paying for the bus ride home. This incredibly harsh, violently unforgiving background forged Yoongi into a man of pure, unbreakable steel, a relentless survivor who had to battle not only the crippling, suffocating grip of poverty, but also his own intensely documented, harrowing struggles with severe depression, social anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive tendencies, all of which he bravely laid bare for the entire world to dissect in his devastatingly vulnerable solo mixtapes. For a man who literally shattered his shoulder in a traumatic delivery bike accident while working a secret part-time job as a teenage trainee, hiding the agonizing pain for years out of pure, terrifying fear that the company would ruthlessly cast him aside and destroy his one single shot at musical salvation, trust is not something that is freely or easily given. It is a sacred, incredibly rare commodity that must be earned through years of absolute, unwavering loyalty. In the hyper-manicured, fiercely monitored universe of the Korean entertainment industry, where idols are heavily conditioned to constantly smile and project an aura of flawless, perpetual happiness, Yoongi is the absolute anomaly, the cynical, sharp-tongued realist who treats his heavily fortified studio, affectionately dubbed the Genius Lab, as his ultimate impenetrable sanctuary from a chaotic, demanding world that constantly wants a piece of his flesh. He practically lives, breathes, and bleeds inside those four walls, locking himself away for days on end, surrounded by glowing monitors, towering synthesizers, and empty coffee cups, pouring every single ounce of his incredibly intense emotional energy, trauma, and suppressed romantic yearning into producing chart-topping masterpieces not just for BTS, but for legendary artists like IU, Halsey, and Psy. When you possess an obsessive, all-consuming work ethic that literally dictates your entire existence, where your brain is constantly churning out complex melodies and intricate lyrical rhymes at 3 a.m, the simple, mundane reality of maintaining a normal, healthy, deeply communicative romantic relationship becomes an almost impossible, mathematically improbable logistical nightmare. Furthermore, Yoongi is acutely, painfully aware of the toxic, bloodthirsty nature of sensationalist paparazzi media. He absolutely despises the superficial, invasive nature of celebrity gossip, knowing full well that if he were to ever publicly reveal a partner, that person would instantly be thrown to the merciless wolves of the internet, their entire past excavated, judged, and brutally torn apart by anonymous netizens who thrive on manufacturing controversy out of thin air. For a fiercely protective man who fundamentally uses his music as a shield and a weapon to defend the marginalized, the broken, and the voiceless, the very thought of dragging someone he genuinely loves into the vicious, unforgiving crosshairs of the global media circus is fundamentally repulsive to his core moral compass. He actively chooses to sacrifice the comforting warmth of a public, traditional romance, because he knows that his deeply introspective, razor-sharp artistry requires an intense level of isolation and uninterrupted mental space, sublimating his deepest human desires into aggressive, spine-chilling rap verses and breathtakingly beautiful piano melodies that provide literal life-saving comfort to millions of fans who feel just as lost and alienated as he once did. To date openly would not only invite a catastrophic level of unwarranted scrutiny into his fiercely guarded private domain, potentially disrupting the delicate, hyper-focused creative flow that keeps him alive, but it would also threaten the incredibly fragile hard-won peace he has managed to establish within his own turbulent mind after years of relentless psychological warfare. He has transformed his overwhelming, deafening solitude into his greatest superpower, recognizing that the monumental responsibility of being the emotional anchor and the primary musical architect for the biggest band on the planet demands a level of personal sacrifice that most ordinary humans could never possibly endure, proudly wearing his single status not as a tragic, lonely badge of sorrow, but as a heavily armored, brilliant strategic choice to fiercely protect his sanity. Even as he boldly embarked on his historic, physically grueling solo world tour for D-Day, standing entirely alone on massive, sold-out stadium stages with nothing but a microphone, a glass of whiskey, and a guitar, physically exhausted and emotionally drained, he proved to the entire world that his ultimate devotion lies strictly with his craft and the millions of screaming fans who hung onto his every single word. The immense, crushing pressure of being a global icon means that his every waking moment is heavily scheduled, meticulously planned, and constantly monitored by a massive entourage of managers, bodyguards, and corporate executives, leaving absolutely zero breathing room for the spontaneous, carefree romance that regular people in their 20s and 30s so effortlessly enjoy. He understands on a profound, deeply philosophical level that introducing a romantic partner into this chaotic, high-stakes ecosystem would instantly subject them to a terrifying barrage of death threats, malicious rumors, and impossible aesthetic standards orchestrated by a toxic minority of hyper-obsessive fans and malicious anti-fans who actively want to see the downfall of BTS. If you really stop and think about the sheer magnitude of the empire he has helped build, an empire that contributes billions of dollars to the South Korean economy and serves as the primary cultural export for an entire nation, the idea of risking everything for a fleeting romantic public outing becomes not just irresponsible but incredibly dangerous. The paparazzi culture in South Korea, spearheaded by infamous outlets that wait in the freezing cold for months just to snap a single, out-of-focus picture of two idols sharing a meal in a dark parking basement, creates an atmosphere of constant, suffocating paranoia where trust is an impossible luxury. For someone like Suga, who values authenticity and raw, unfiltered truth above absolutely all else, having to hide, lie, or carefully stage a relationship behind tinted car windows and secret apartment elevators would completely destroy his spirit and contradict the very essence of the honest, unapologetic message he preaches in his music. He has witnessed firsthand how viciously the media tears down couples in the industry, analyzing their body language, digging up their high school records, and creating a living nightmare that inevitably destroys the romance itself. By choosing to stand alone, cloaked in the mysterious, brooding aura of a solitary artist, he maintains absolute, unyielding control over his own narrative, refusing to let his deeply private emotional life become cheap, consumable content for a ruthless, profit-driven media machine, leaving us to forever wonder what beautiful, untold love stories might be permanently hidden beneath the surface of his heavy, melancholic piano chords. Number 4. J-Hope, The Sunshine's Shadow, A Golden Cage. When we shift the blinding, hyper-focused spotlight onto the phenomenal, gravity-defying main dancer and radiant emotional core of the group, Jungkook, universally adored by millions as J-Hope, we are immediately drawn into one of the most fascinating, beautifully tragic psychological contrasts in the entire history of modern pop culture. To the casual observer and even to the deeply devoted ARMY, J-Hope is the undisputed living embodiment of pure, unadulterated joy, a human battery of relentless positivity who constantly introduces himself with the iconic heart-melting catchphrase, "I'm your hope, you're my hope, I'm J-Hope," while flashing a devastatingly gorgeous heart-shaped smile that can practically cure seasonal depression on contact. However, behind this brilliantly maintained, incredibly demanding persona of the group's eternal sunshine lies the brutally intense, agonizingly strict reality of a man who serves as the terrifyingly precise dance leader of the biggest musical act on the planet. A perfectionist who misses absolutely nothing and demands absolute, flawless execution from himself and his brothers. If you dare to peel back the glittering, vibrant layers of his colorful stage outfits and his infectious loud laughter, you will uncover the staggering weight of a man who willingly sacrificed his own fundamental right to public human vulnerability, including the messy, unpredictable and often painful reality of romantic relationships, simply to protect the pristine utopian illusion that his stage name boldly promises to a world in desperate need of comfort. Imagine the insurmountable psychological pressure of being legally and conceptually bound to the word hope. In the hyper-scrutinized, fiercely conservative ecosystem of the South Korean entertainment industry, where the most innocent interaction between a male and female idol is instantly weaponized by malicious internet trolls and invasive tabloids, for J-Hope to be caught in a scandalous, highly publicized romance would violently disrupt the flawless, comforting narrative he has spent over a decade meticulously building with his literal blood, sweat, and endless tears in the underground dance battles of Gwangju. He knows exactly how the vicious, unforgiving media machine operates. They love nothing more than to tear down the brightest stars, and the moment a paparazzi camera catches him holding hands with a romantic partner, the narrative would instantly shift from his groundbreaking artistry and historical Lollapalooza headlining performance to cheap, sensationalized gossip about his private affections, completely undermining his unparalleled work ethic. This is a man who literally pushed his physical body to the absolute brink of exhaustion, surviving grueling 15-hour dance practices in a moldy basement studio, solely driven by a desperate, burning desire to succeed and carry his team to the very top of the global charts. Introducing a romantic partner into this insanely high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar pressure cooker would not only subject the person he loves to unimaginable online harassment, extreme cyberbullying, and terrifying real-world stalking from a toxic minority of obsessive individuals who blur the lines between fandom and obsession, but it would also jeopardize the sacred, unbreakable bond of trust he shares with his bandmates and the massive global fan base that financially and emotionally sustains their empire. Therefore, J-Hope consciously, bravely chooses to lock away his most intimate, deeply personal romantic desires, sublimating his natural human craving for love and affection into his breathtakingly aggressive choreography, and his shockingly dark, introspective solo masterpieces like the critically acclaimed album, Jack in the Box. In that deeply personal record, he finally boldly revealed the suffocating shadows that naturally accompany his blinding light, confessing to the world that being everyone's constant pillar of strength often leaves him feeling entirely empty, burnt out, and isolated behind the scenes, effectively proving that his perpetual smile is not just a natural disposition, but a heavily armored, deliberately constructed shield designed to protect his fragile human heart from a world that demands far too much of him. He's acutely aware that the paparazzi, especially notorious outlets like Dispatch, are constantly lurking in the shadows, hiding in underground parking lots and stalking his every move, waiting for that one tiny slip-up, that one momentary lapse in judgment where he dares to act like a normal man in his late 20s who just wants to take someone on a quiet, romantic date. To protect his family, his hard-won legacy, and the emotional sanity of the members who rely on his unwavering discipline, J-Hope chooses the agonizing, lonely path of absolute secrecy, creating a massive, impenetrable fortress around his private life that absolutely no one is allowed to breach. He channels all of his passion, his romantic yearnings, and his profound capacity for love directly into his art, his staggering fashion choices, and his breathtaking stage presence, essentially dadding his career and giving all of his radiant energy to millions of strangers who scream his name in sold-out stadiums from Seoul to Los Angeles, while he silently returns to empty, quiet hotel rooms, left completely alone with his echoing thoughts and the immense, unspoken burden of being a global beacon of light, who must forever navigate the dark, treacherous waters of extreme fame entirely by himself. When you critically examine the sheer unprecedented scale of his global influence, sitting front row at Paris Fashion Week for Louis Vuitton and Dior, commanding the attention of the entire fashion and music industry simultaneously, the logistical reality of maintaining a healthy, private relationship becomes a mathematical impossibility. The absolute lack of privacy is not just an inconvenience. It is a terrifying, omnipresent threat to his mental well-being and the safety of anyone brave enough to stand by his side in the romantic sense. He has seen the devastating psychological toll that public dating scandals take on his peers in the K-pop industry, watching as careers are mercilessly destroyed, apologies are forced for the simple crime of falling in love, and public executions are carried out on social media by anonymous critics who hold idols to impossible godlike standards of purity. J-Hope, with his incredible emotional intelligence and razor-sharp industry awareness, refuses to play that dangerous, unwinnable game. He knows that his fans look to him for stability, for an escape from their own grueling realities, and he takes that monumental responsibility with a seriousness that borders on the religious. He would rather shoulder the quiet, agonizing sting of loneliness, wrapping himself in the comforting, albeit cold, embrace of his massive success, than risk shattering the intricate, beautiful glass castle he has built for ARMY. The sacrifices he makes in the dark, the silent tears he might shed when the cameras finally stop rolling and the heavy makeup is wiped away, are the hidden costs of his global superstardom. It is a testament to his unbelievable strength of character that he continues to show up, day after day, delivering performances of a lifetime with an energy that seems almost supernatural, all while carrying the profound, invisible grief of a man who cannot freely hold the hand of someone he loves on a crowded street. His choice to hide his love life is not a deception. It is the ultimate, selfless act of a true artist who has decided that his purpose on this earth, the healing power of his music and his dance, is vastly more important than his own personal, romantic gratification. And so, the sunshine of BTS continues to burn intensely, offering his warmth to a desperate world, while keeping his deepest affections fiercely guarded in the cool, untouched shadows of his own private universe, leaving us completely captivated and utterly desperate to know what secrets lie behind the brightest smile in K-pop. Number 3. Jimin, the siren of stage, a fatal devotion. When we step into the intensely magnetic, almost dangerously intoxicating orbit of Park Jimin, the mesmerizing lead vocalist and main dancer whose mere presence can send millions of fans into an absolute hyperventilating frenzy, we are immediately confronted with the incredibly delicate, razor-thin line between authentic human affection and the suffocating demands of a fiercely possessive global parasocial dynamic. To truly understand why a man blessed with such unearthly, androgynous beauty and devastating, natural charm heavily guards his romantic life behind a fortress of titanium-level secrecy, we have to deeply analyze the specific, wildly obsessive brand of devotion that his idol persona actively cultivates and heavily relies upon. Jimin is universally recognized as the ultimate, angelic emotional caretaker of BTS, the incredibly empathetic member who spent countless hours late at night on platforms like Weverse or VLive, whispering comforting, soul-healing words to fans around the globe, creating a deeply profound, almost intoxicating illusion of a one-on-one, intensely intimate relationship with millions of strangers simultaneously. This unparalleled level of intense, emotional fan engagement is an absolute double-edged sword of the highest, most dangerous magnitude. While it successfully propelled him to the very zenith of global brand reputation rankings for an unprecedented, record-breaking number of consecutive months, it also inadvertently nurtured a tiny, yet terrifyingly loud fraction of hyper-obsessive fans who genuinely, delusionally believe they possess some form of exclusive ownership over his physical and emotional being. If we trace his journey back to his grueling, agonizing early days as a top-ranking modern dance prodigy at the Busan High School of Arts, a young man who literally slept only 2 hours a night in the practice room just to secure his precarious, highly contested spot in the final debut lineup, we see a heartbreaking pattern of extreme, self-destructive perfectionism that still fiercely governs his life today. He is a man who famously pushed his body through brutal, torturous starvation diets during the blood, sweat, and tears era just to achieve a specific razor-sharp visual aesthetic that the merciless, hypercritical K-pop industry demanded, proving that there is absolutely no physical or emotional boundary he won't aggressively cross to maintain the pristine, godlike image that ARMY deeply adores. Introducing a public romantic partner into this highly volatile, emotionally charged ecosystem would be the absolute equivalent of throwing a lit, highly explosive match into a massive powder keg. The inevitable, catastrophic backlash from the most toxic, fiercely territorial corners of the internet would instantly subject his significant other to a living, breathing nightmare of endless cyberbullying, terrifying death threats, and malicious, fabricated rumors designed to completely destroy their character and force a tragic, highly publicized breakup. He knows exactly how violently the dark side of idol culture operates, having personally witnessed the terrifying sassings, extreme stalker fans, who regularly breach their private spaces, buy their illegal flight information, and aggressively wait outside their highly secure luxury apartments just to catch a single fleeting glimpse of them off camera, proving that his life is already heavily monitored with the suffocating intensity of a maximum security prison. Because of this terrifying, omnipresent reality, Jimin consciously, bravely decides to absorb the crushing, bone-deep loneliness of supreme global fame, choosing to heavily sublimate his intense, natural human yearning for deeply passionate romantic love into his groundbreaking, chart-topping solo artistry. When you meticulously listen to the raw, unfiltered emotional agony bleeding through the tracks of his historic Billboard Hot 100 topping solo album Face, specifically in the intoxicating, synth-heavy masterpiece, Like Crazy, you are hearing the genuine heartbreaking confession of a man who desperately uses the chaotic, dizzying blur of late-night parties, loud music, and temporary superficial distractions just to numb the profound, echoing emptiness of returning to a massive, perfectly decorated luxury home where absolutely no one is waiting for him. He pours all of his seductive, romantic energy, his breathtakingly sensual contemporary dance movements, and his deeply passionate soul strictly into his spectacular stage performances, effectively channeling his suppressed, private desires into a mesmerizing visual feast that leaves entire stadiums absolutely breathless and completely begging for more. To publicly declare his love for a single individual would fundamentally shatter the captivating, universally accessible fantasy he has meticulously, painfully built, potentially destabilizing the fragile emotional crutch that countless fans desperately rely on to survive their own dark, challenging realities. He deeply understands the monumental, terrifying weight of the glittering crown he wears, recognizing that the absolute highest level of superstardom demands the ultimate, devastating sacrifice of his own private romantic freedom, turning his incredibly massive, empathetic heart into a heavily guarded, heavily armored sanctuary that nobody is ever allowed to truly enter without risking absolute destruction. By keeping his love life entirely hidden in the darkest, most inaccessible shadows, heavily cloaked in a veil of polite, professional mystery, Jimin fiercely protects the innocent people he might deeply care about from the ravenous, bloodthirsty fangs of the global tabloid media and the extreme, unforgiving scrutiny of the public eye. It is a profoundly tragic irony that the very man who possesses the magical, almost supernatural ability to make millions of people feel profoundly seen, deeply cherished, and completely loved with just a single crescent-eyed smile, is structurally trapped in a gilded diamond-encrusted cage where he is fundamentally denied the simple, universally human privilege of experiencing a normal, quiet, and fiercely private romance. He has witnessed the brutal, unforgiving mechanics of the Korean entertainment news cycle, where anonymous insiders and ruthless paparazzi actively hunt down idols with high-tech cameras, creating a terrifying atmosphere of constant paranoia that inevitably kills any blooming romance before it even has the chance to properly blossom. Therefore, the breathtaking, intoxicating illusion of Jimin's constant availability remains perfectly intact, a brilliantly executed, beautifully tragic masterpiece of self-sacrifice that allows the colossal empire of BTS to continue dominating the global music industry completely unscathed, proving that behind his soft, undeniably angelic exterior lies a fiercely protective, incredibly strong-willed man who silently, bravely continues to dance entirely alone in the dark. Number 2. V, the masterpiece of mystery, a captive of the canvas. When we dare to step into the incredibly mesmerizing, visually intoxicating, and profoundly enigmatic universe of Kim Taehyung, globally worshipped by millions as V, we are instantly crossing the threshold into a beautifully complicated, heavily guarded realm where breathtaking museum-quality aesthetics violently collide with the crushing, inescapable reality of being the ultimate, undisputed it boy of the 21st century. To truly comprehend the absolute, terrifying magnitude of why a man who possesses the kind of devastating, classic Hollywood beauty that literally breaks global internet servers and repeatedly earns him the title of the most handsome face in the world, must keep his romantic life locked away in a titanium vault, we must first travel back to his humble, incredibly grounded origins. Picture a completely innocent, wide-eyed boy raised by his beloved grandmother in the quiet, rural farming town of Jeochang, a gentle soul who genuinely thought his ultimate destiny was to become a simple farmer or perhaps a professional saxophone player, entirely oblivious to the cutthroat, hyper-competitive, and heavily manufactured machinery of the Seoul entertainment industry. When he accidentally auditioned, and was subsequently hidden away by his agency as the legendary secret weapon of BTS until the very last moments before their official debut, a permanent, inescapable aura of intense mystery was firmly attached to his identity, a mysterious veil that continues to heavily dictate the trajectory of his intensely private life today. V is a man who operates on an entirely different, incredibly soulful frequency. He is a bona fide old soul trapped in the blinding hyperdigital panopticon of modern superstardom, a deeply artistic spirit who finds genuine solace in the crackle of vintage jazz vinyl records, the melancholic strokes of Vincent van Gogh paintings, quietly wandering through empty art exhibitions under his pseudonym Vant, and capturing the fleeting, mundane beauty of the world through the lens of his beloved film cameras. Because he possesses such an intensely romantic, deeply cinematic view of the world, it is incredibly easy to imagine him yearning for a classic, quiet and deeply profound love story, the kind of gentle, unhurried romance you see in the old, black-and-white movies he so passionately adores. However, the agonizing, brutal reality of his unprecedented global fame dictates that such a simple, beautifully ordinary love story is fundamentally, mathematically impossible in his current existence. We are talking about a man whose mere physical presence at the Celine fashion show in Paris literally caused the streets to shut down, triggering absolute unprecedented pandemonium that shocked the global fashion elite. A man who shattered multiple Guinness World Records in a matter of hours simply by opening a personal Instagram account, proving that his absolute, undeniable influence over the global cultural zeitgeist is something the world has arguably never seen before. When you wield that level of terrifying, absolute power, where every single item of clothing you accidentally wear sells out in mere seconds and every single song you recommend instantly shoots to the top of the charts, your romantic life completely ceases to be your own. It immediately becomes a highly contested, extremely lucrative public commodity. He is acutely, painfully aware that the relentless, bloodthirsty paparazzi machinery and a toxic, highly vocal minority of extreme internet stalkers are constantly watching his every single move with terrifying, microscopic precision, aggressively analyzing the reflections in his spoons, hyperfixating on the background noise of his live streams, and illegally hacking into private flight manifests just to desperately manufacture the next explosive, career-threatening dating scandal. For someone as fiercely loyal, deeply empathetic, and fiercely protective of his inner circle as Taehyung, a man who famously cherishes his close-knit, Suga squad and treats his beloved Pomeranian Yonton with more respect than most people treat human beings, the very thought of dragging a romantic partner into this violently toxic, incredibly unforgiving media circus is a line he simply refuses to cross. He has personally witnessed the horrifying, deeply traumatizing lengths to which sensationalist tabloid outlets will go to completely ruin the lives of anyone remotely associated with him, weaponizing innocent interactions, fabricating malicious, highly damaging rumors out of thin air, and subjecting potential partners to a relentless psychological torture chamber of endless cyberbullying, terrifying death threats, and impossible, godlike physical comparisons. Therefore, V consciously, bravely makes the incredibly lonely, heart-wrenching decision to sublimate all of his intense, suppressed romantic desires, his profound, aching yearning for genuine human connection, and his deep, melancholic loneliness straight into his breathtakingly beautiful solo artistry. When you deeply listen to the intoxicating, soulful R&B grooves of his highly acclaimed solo album Layover, or lose yourself in the hauntingly beautiful, spine-chilling baritone of his OST masterworks like Sweet Night and Christmas Tree, you are not just listening to pop music. You are actively bearing witness to the incredibly raw, unfiltered confessions of a man who uses his music as a massive, beautifully decorated emotional canvas to safely paint the intense feelings of love and longing that he is strictly forbidden from expressing in the real, physical world. He actively chooses to wrap himself in a deeply captivating, highly sophisticated enigma, giving his massive, fiercely devoted global audience an endless array of spectacular, meticulously crafted visual concepts, jaw-dropping fashion moments, and deeply comforting late-night interactive broadcasts, while deliberately, heavily barricading the most intimate, fragile corners of his human heart. It is the ultimate, tragic paradox of Kim Taehyung's magnificent existence. He is the undisputed, golden muse for the entire world, a living, breathing masterpiece who inspires millions of people to aggressively pursue beauty and love in their own lives, yet he is permanently trapped inside the gilded, heavily guarded frame of his own unparalleled superstardom, forcing him to quietly navigate the echoing, deafening solitude of his luxurious reality entirely alone. Fiercely protecting the absolute sanctity of his private affections from a ravenous world that constantly demands to consume every single piece of his soul, leaving us all to wonder just how heavy that invisible, diamond-encrusted crown truly feels when the deafening roar of the crowd finally fades into absolute silence. Number 1. Jungkook, the Golden Maknae's Burden, a worldwide phenomenon. And we finally reach the absolute pinnacle of this spectacular, mind-bending countdown. The blinding, unparalleled spotlight aggressively shifts to the undisputed, gravity-defying center of the group, Jungkook, universally hailed as the legendary Golden Maknae, who has miraculously, flawlessly evolved from a painfully shy, introverted 15-year-old boy from Busan into a towering, history-making global pop titan who literally commands the entire music industry with a single, effortless breath. To truly, deeply comprehend the staggering, almost suffocating magnitude of why this fiercely independent, incredibly tattooed and breathtakingly talented multimillionaire keeps his romantic universe sealed behind an impenetrable titanium fortress. You have to fundamentally understand the utterly unprecedented, heavily documented psychological trauma of quite literally growing up inside a hypervigilant global fishbowl, where every single micro-expression, wardrobe choice, late-night breath is violently dissected by tens of millions of people in real time. This is a young man who bravely left the comforting, protective embrace of his family at an unimaginably tender age, a child who used to wait until his older members fell asleep just so he could secretly cry in the cramped, freezing shower of their dilapidated single-room dorm, because the terrifying, crushing weight of his monumental dreams felt far too heavy for his fragile teenage shoulders to bear. Over the past decade, the entire world has aggressively, obsessively watched him transform, scrutinizing his incredibly profound journey from the quiet, doe-eyed teenager who was physically paralyzed by stage fright into the unstoppable Billboard-dominating solo superstar who completely shattered global streaming records with his intoxicating, unapologetically mature solo anthems like 7, 3D, and Standing Next to You, proving definitively that he is the ultimate, undisputed pop king of his generation. But this unbelievable, mind-boggling level of astronomical fame comes with an incredibly dark, blood-chilling price tag, a terrifying, inescapable reality of extreme, suffocating surveillance that would effortlessly break the minds of ordinary human beings in a matter of days. Jungkook is profoundly, agonizingly aware of the terrifying, toxic underbelly of his massive, world-conquering popularity, having personally bravely confronted the absolute worst, most horrific nightmares of extreme sassing culture on a terrifyingly regular basis, boldly taking to his live broadcasts to literally beg obsessive stalkers to stop illegally sending unsolicited food deliveries to his highly secure private residence, and aggressively calling out the terrifying individuals who dangerously follow him to his private gym sessions in the dead of night. When your absolute, fundamental right to basic human safety and basic privacy is continuously, violently violated on a daily basis by people who delusionally believe they possess exclusive ownership over your existence, the very concept of introducing a vulnerable, deeply loved romantic partner into this chaotic, highly explosive crossfire becomes not just a logistical impossibility, but a terrifying, life-threatening hazard. He knows exactly how the vicious, bloodthirsty machinery of the sensationalist paparazzi and anonymous internet trolls operate. They are desperately, constantly lurking in the shadows, armed with high-tech cameras and malicious intent, waiting for the slightest, tiniest excuse to completely tear down the monumental billion-dollar empire he has shed literal blood, sweat, and endless tears to build from the absolute ground up. If Jungkook were to casually step out into the blinding daylight and proudly hold hands with someone he genuinely, deeply loves, that innocent individual would instantaneously be thrown directly into a merciless, blazing inferno of extreme global cyberbullying, their entire past ruthlessly excavated, and their physical appearance brutally, unfairly compared to impossible godlike industry standards, completely destroying their mental health and fundamentally ruining the pure, beautiful sanctity of the romance itself. For a man who is fiercely protective, incredibly loyal, and deeply, intensely passionate about the people he holds dear in his tightly knit inner circle, exposing a lover to that terrifying, unforgiving madness is a line he simply, absolutely refuses to cross. He is a generational talent, a breathtaking anomaly in the meticulously manufactured landscape of the entertainment industry. Someone who actively challenges the highly restrictive boundaries placed upon him by fearlessly getting full-sleeve tattoos and facial piercings in a society that still heavily stigmatizes such bold, unapologetic displays of personal freedom, proving that while he may belong to the world, he still fiercely, desperately fights for absolute control over his own physical body and his own fiercely guarded narrative. Yet when it comes to the incredibly fragile, highly sensitive domain of his romantic affections, he willingly, tragically chooses absolute, total submission to the shadows, recognizing that the brutal, hyper-competitive ecosystem of the Korean idol industry fundamentally weaponizes love, turning beautiful, authentic human connection into a highly scandalous, intensely profitable controversy that completely destroys careers overnight. Instead of playing a dangerous, incredibly risky game of Russian roulette with the vicious media tabloids, he powerfully, consciously channels all of his intense, boiling romantic energy, his natural, fiery 20s, something yearning for deeply passionate human connection, and his profound, aching loneliness straight into his breathtakingly raw, physically exhausting live performances, passionately pouring his entire, unfiltered soul into massive, sold-out stadium stages where he flawlessly gives everything he has left to the millions of screaming fans who fiercely adore him. He brilliantly, tragically sublimates his intense desire for a normal, quiet love story by constantly, selflessly turning on his camera at 3 a.m, singing soulful impromptu acoustic covers, cooking late-night meals, and even folding his laundry in front of millions of glowing screens, actively choosing to fiercely guard his own personal romantic heart while generously, endlessly providing a profound life-saving sense of comfort, companionship, and genuine solace to a massive global audience that is just as fiercely desperate for connection as he is. By maintaining this strict, ironclad veil of absolute secrecy around his love life, Jungkook is not just protecting a potential partner from the ravenous, unforgiving wolves of the internet. He is fiercely, desperately defending his own sanity, preserving a tiny, incredibly sacred piece of Jungkook the human being, a private sanctuary completely untouched and uncorrupted by the blinding, overwhelming demands of his global alter ego. He fully understands that the incredibly heavy diamond-encrusted crown of being the undisputed face of global pop music dictates an agonizing, completely unconditional surrender of his own private romantic freedom, boldly accepting the cold, deeply isolating reality that the very fame that essentially handed him the entire universe on a silver platter has simultaneously, permanently robbed him of the incredibly simple, universally beautiful privilege of falling in love openly. Without fear, without absolute chaos, and without the terrifying, deafening roar of the world constantly demanding to consume every single piece of his fiercely guarded, incredibly beautiful heart, leaving the legendary unstoppable dream of BTS to continue dominating the history books while he silently, bravely carries the profound, invisible burden of extreme, deafening loneliness into the quiet, lonely hours of the night.